Are you down with having a renewed friendship, even from a distance? Even if it means just a FaceTime and a beer. Even if it means just talking to each other on the phone once in a while and supporting each other as we go through life. These renewed friendships are the first place you look, because there's a history and there's already something there. And the question is, who do you want to be? I call it the 5 people. I mean, Jim Rohn many years ago said, it's not science, but it's intuitive. We become the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. So choose your 5 carefully.
Okay, so that makes me wonder why I'm spending so much time with you, Tim, right?
I think we better start the show.
All right. Welcome to Behavioral Grooves. I'm Kurt Nelson, and today we are excited to share our conversation with Dr. Adam Dorsay, a clinical psychologist in Silicon Valley, the author of Super Psyched, a psychologist's journey to more joy, connection, and meaning in life. Adam is also the host of the Authentic Happiness podcast, and he maintains a clinical practice all at the same time.
Classic underachiever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Tim Houlihan, and Adam has worked with thousands of clients, from tech executives to entrepreneurs, helping them build more meaningful lives through deeper connections. He's distilled all these learnings into his book, and the conversation that we had with Adam was just incredible. His energy and his enthusiasm, or as his old bandmates would call it, enthusiadum, were just infectious.
Oh my gosh, they really were. You know what struck me most about this conversation? He has a framework for understanding connections. He breaks it down into 4 distinct types: connecting with yourself, connecting with others, connecting with the world around you, and then connecting with something greater.
Yeah, it's a really simple model to help us get to the next level. And he also explained that self-connection has to come first. It's like the foundation that everything else builds upon. Now, he gave this great example of how you just can't really truly connect with others or appreciate experiences if you're disconnected from yourself. Like, you can't enjoy a beautiful moment in the world while you're having a terrible toothache.
Yeah, it's so true. It's putting your own mask on first, right? We've heard this in many of our interviews. Rachel Glick, who is either just coming on next episode or has just happened. Don't know the order, right? But all of this is to say that too often we forget that.
Yeah.
Wait for it. Context matters.
Shootsy scores!
Another theme that we talked about with Adam. And what really stood out to me was that his insight about modern friendships and why they are so challenging today. And while a lot of people are bashing digital connections, Adam puts a more positive spin on that technology, and he really urges us to put it to really good use.
Yeah, agreed. He also talked about how we used to live in villages, like small groups, tribes, where different people in our lives filled different roles. Like, we had advisors and running partners and drinking buddies. They were all different people. In today's world, where we move around a lot and work remotely, we often expect our partner to be everything, to be our confidant, our entertainment partner, and intellectual sparring partner, and more. It's not just that it's not realistic, it's also not very healthy.
No, I double down on that, right? And Adam also offered some very practical advice, like reaching out to old friends with video calls and beers. And when it comes to making new friends, he suggested using what he calls the drive-away test. It's this idea that you ask yourself how you felt after leaving, right? If you're in the driveway after spending time with someone, did you feel energized or did you feel drained? And he emphasized, and I think this is important, that loneliness is more damaging to our health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Full stop.
Yeah.
That's something to take in right there, right? And by the way, loneliness is more easily remedied than smoking.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Okay. But here's a question for you, Kurt. How do you feel about Partridge?
When I'm with Partridge, I give it everything I got.
Yes.
Okay. All right, listeners, you're just going to have to sit in and listen as Adam tells a story to understand that joke, right? But know this, it perfectly captures his message about being fully present in whatever you're doing. It's just too often that we miss the beauty of the moments because we're we're distracted by our phones or caught up in social comparison or just like on auto dial, right? That's just it.
This theme about savoring comes up frequently in conversations that you and I have, Kurt. So it's so important to stay focused on what you're doing now and to stop from time to time and just smell the roses.
Yeah. So agree. And with that, Groovers, we encourage you to sit back with a generous pour of enthusiasm and enjoy our conversation with Adam Dorsay.
Adam Dorsay, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
Tim, Kurt, I am so stoked to be with you guys. You guys are fantastic. One of the best green room conversations ever.
We're off to a good start. I love it already. Okay, so first speed round question, Adam, would you prefer to learn a new instrument or a new language?
I'd prefer to learn a new language.
Ooh.
Okay, because you've mastered all the instruments?
No, I love playing instruments, but my gosh, here's the thing. When you're playing an instrument, you can't talk to people, and I'm all about talking with people.
Oh.
And for some reason, there's creativity that comes as a byproduct of learning these new linguistic ideas. Like in Japanese, which is a language I do speak, there are words that do not exist as true English equivalents. And it causes the brain to it's almost like going into a matrix. So when you learn a foreign language, it expands my creativity, it expands the net of people I can speak to. I just spoke with Adam Galinsky, who said that the more time we immerse ourselves in another culture, the more creative we become. And there's just nothing like having a beer at a Spanish pub, getting into something really hardcore with a guy who does not speak English and just goes at it in Spanish.
Wow.
And it's just so much fun. So if I could learn another language, that would be amazing.
Cool.
I am the single language person on the show here, and the single actually no instrument on the show here. So this is all.
You occupy a special space.
Yeah, I occupy that lonely space of being just a loser. So there you go.
You are so not a loser.
All right, Adam. Second speed round question. Are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
I love them both, but all about coffee. Coffee is so big that I even interviewed a guy who has a doctorate in coffee studies from the University of Hawaii on one of my 250 podcast episodes. And there's just talking about coffee is endlessly fun. Tea is endlessly fun as well. But when it comes down to it, if you have to put a gun in my head,
if you had to choose,
question,
if there was
boom,
like one for the rest of your life, it was going to be coffee.
Oh man, coffee is awesome.
I love the fact that you interviewed a coffeeologist. Is that? I mean, is that...
Yeah, I guess you could call him that. I don't know what the proper term is, but he has his doctorate in coffee studies from the University of Hawaii.
Oh my gosh!
The dude knew his stuff. He wrote a book. He was one of the authors on the Big Book of Coffee, and I just said, "I'm interviewing you," and he said, "Sure."
That is fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. All right.
Okay, third speed round question. On a nice warm day when you're rolling down the road and you're listening to music on your car, true or false? Do you roll up your car windows when a George Michael song comes on?
False. Now, it was true many years ago. And the two of you have clearly read my book, because coming to terms with my love for George Michael's music was difficult. When I grew up, you weren't allowed to like him. And for years, I had my windows rolled up to the top. It was a quiet, what I called a guilty pleasure. And when I got older, I realized no such thing as a guilty pleasure. There's pleasure and there's non-pleasure. As long as you're hurting no one, George Michael is not hurting anyone. Greatest voice. I will die on this hill. Greatest voice I've ever heard. And yeah. I just, for me, I know. I mean, we're all allowed to have our goats. He's my goat.
It's interesting. I was never, again, growing up, and I'm of the age in the 80s. I was in high school and college, and so Wham, was there big, and I was like, no, that's too poppy, too whatever. But to your point, my wife and I just watched a documentary on that Wham a few years ago, and changed my entire perspective. And I have a new appreciation for George. I like George Michael's actual solo stuff more than his Wham stuff, but I have a greater appreciation for Wham.
Yeah, he's not just a pretty boy. He's got a lot of depth. Yeah. And it's not at the exclusion of the stuff that I was listening to. I mean, the stuff I was openingly listening to in high school was, like the Smiths, Depeche Mode, U2, REM, of course, like the kind of standard stuff, as well as some of the more esoteric stuff. But I was not out there with it. Like I'd blast the Violent Femmes hard in my car.
Yeah.
That was totally acceptable. but
But
quietly in my bedroom, it was just like, George, I don't know how to come to terms with the fact that you are incredible. And in 2008, I was like the only straight guy who went there by himself. My wife didn't want to go. So I got a single ticket. I saw all these guys there with their girlfriends, seemingly not wanting to be there, and a bunch of gay men. And then there was me in category 3. And I'm so glad I saw him. He destroyed. I mean,
That's good.
I could not get over the power of that guy.
And not to sound morbid, but was George Michael's death maybe the best thing that ever happened to Andrew Ripley?
Like, oh no, terrible.
That was, Tim, like, how could you go there?
Like, people would not be talking to Andrew if George was still around.
I always wonder what it's like to be Oates or, Garfunkel. There's even a TV show called Garfunkel and Oates. But like, it's like, what's that like to be the other guy?
Exactly.
And everybody asked the same question, like, what did Andrew Wrigley do? And he was really important for the formation of Wham and the continuation of it till its end. But yeah, it's very, very what a sweet man. In the interviews, like, you can tell this guy's a nice person.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I don't believe you went down that really dark road there, Mr. Littlehan. What the? Oh my God! All right, we're going. We got to move on. We got to get out of that.
We got to get through the speed round
negative piece there. Yeah. All right.
Oh man, I'm loving this, dude. I love the speed round. This is awesome.
Yeah, and the speed round is definitely the misnomer, and I say this almost every single time because it's never speedy. We never get out of this quickly. It's never a boom, 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 boom. It's always tell me more about that. So, all right, last of our semi-speed round questions here. How important is it to choose your life mate carefully?
Possibly the single most important thing we are called to do if we wish to be in a relationship. I believe that I think it was some guy who wrote a book called Life's Little Secrets, H. Jackson Brown. There we go. He said, from this one decision, choosing your life's partner, from this one decision will come more than 90% of your happiness or misery. And I think that's absolutely true. I mean, anybody who's been in just a crummy relationship, hopefully it was a boyfriend, girlfriend, or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, relationship short term. And those are great to have only because they serve as a basis for comparison. There's an old joke, the husband asks the wife, honey, do you love me? And she says, compared to whom? And I think it's I think that having a basis of comparison can be really wonderful. Wow. At a particular age, I hit 34, and I had just broken up with a wonderful, wonderful woman, but I knew she was all wrong for me based on the feedback she gave me. And so we break up. And I decided, you know what? I haven't really been thinking with this thing. What's it called? Oh, a brain. I hadn't been thinking with that. That brain thing that I'm tapping on. I hadn't been using that. I'd been using my heart and other, organs to inform my decision, but I hadn't really been using my brain. And so I wrote out what I called the list. The list includes like the requirements, like must-haves, deal breakers, like, and must-not-haves. Like for me, smoking was not for me. I'm not trying to throw shade on smokers. Yeah. I know I'm talking to North Carolina over there, but I also want to make sure that was a no-go for me. I also knew that she needed to love pets. I knew she needed to love travel. But I also knew she needed to think psychologically. She needed to have a psychological brain. Those were requirements based on real life history. I don't know if you ever saw the movie High Fidelity, where John Cusack goes through his mental inventory of all of his relationships, asking himself, like, what worked and what didn't work, and like, what's going on here? And that was that moment. That was my High Fidelity moment. And lo and behold, after, dating or just kind of going out on these very thoughtful, almost HR interview-like dates where I was just trying to get to know people, and I happened to run into the woman who would ultimately be my wife. And she was like a banger in terms of all the things that were absolute requirements. And if there's a no... If we try, we often try to reconcile, I realize it's a deal breaker, but so good looking, and the sex is great and blah, blah, blah. And we have so much fun together. If there's a deal breaker, it's been my personal and professional experience that deal breaker will show up and it will cause a rift, possibly the end of the relationship. So why not rule that out from the beginning using our brains? We want all of our organs to be in alignment, of course, but let's lead with the brain.
I
Let's
love
go
that.
brain and down.
It's amazing when you talk about that, the idea of having those other previous relationships to compare to and to learn. And that is so true. And I don't know if my son will listen to this episode or his ex-girlfriend, but it was
No.
really funny because there was
No.
a period where they were over having dinner, and my wife and I both realized they need to break up. This is just not working. But they were 6 months from that realization because it was their first big relationship. And they had just not gone through this. And we knew that by their second or third relationship, they would have ended it right then. But at that point, it hadn't gone there. And so just that experience of going through and realizing and coming to grips with that so that you do learn and realize. And I think that is so powerful. And to your point, it's like at some point you have to start thinking with your brain about the relationship as opposed to everything below the head, right? And kind of get to, well, what are those non-negotiables? What are those things that I really love? And then that's when it really just shines. And so I love that part of your book when you were talking about that relationship and the importance of that relationship and choosing
Kurt, and I'm
wisely.
so happy that your son had that experience and that she had that experience, because the only way we learn is through experience. Harville Hendrix, who is one of my favorite people in relationship studies. He got Oprah her first Emmy, and he's just a really big deal in terms of understanding couple therapy. He says that all learning transpires in the context of relationships. So we have to have these relationships in order to learn. Your son was learning, his girlfriend was learning, like, what works, what doesn't work. And we can hypothesize and theorize, but nothing matters as much as when the rubber meets the road and you have a real relationship from which to learn.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so that aside, the speed round done.
We'll get into the actual conversation now. Here we go.
But if you guys want to have a 2.0 and just have all speed rounds, that is my jam. I love the speed round.
Well, okay. Well, let me frame this question this way, because the book we're talking about with Adam here is Super Psyched. Okay, why do we have to be super psyched? Why can't we just be psyched?
And I want to be really clear. Super psyched does not mean being happy all the time. That's what we call toxic positivity. Yeah. I'm not peddling that. I'm talking about being super connected to our psyches, which is the part of us that kind of Carl Jung describes as what informs our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So if we're connected to the parts of ourselves that inform our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors aren't just going to happen. We will actually have a say as they happen. What happens when we just act automatically? It's as if a car is driving us through life. That's no good.
Yeah.
We need to know what's going on. And if I was to say to you, hey, Kurt, here's a great idea. I love your car, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to plaster your dashboard with electrical tape. You're not going to be able to see jack. You would not be connected to the feedback that you need to know about your oil, your gas, your speed, all the things. And being super connected to our psyches is akin to being super connected to our dashboards in life, so that we are in the driver's seat and they are not driving us. And so I'm really here to say that being super psyched sometimes means being super sad. Being if your dog dies. I mean, when my dog dies, I cry. When my cats die, I cry. I mean, I'm a real animal person. When somebody in my life dies or something horrible happens, I feel it. And grief is a natural response. So being super psyched can mean being super connected to that. It can also mean saying, you know what? I'm not a really good laugher. I want to improve my ability to laugh, and I want to be super psyched. And I somehow don't laugh that hard. What if being super psyched meant laughing 10% harder? What if it meant being a little more alive than we actually have been told we should be? I remember just one really just funny moment that I had in college. I'm sitting across from a college student, and she says to me, wow, I was going off on something that got me really excited. And she said, you're really easily impressed. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, I have a high threshold for appreciation. And I'm sure that the two of you have been out, like, I'm going to go North Carolina again. Let's imagine you're out for a barbecue and I'm with you and I am going out of my freaking mind because I realize this is awesome. And I'm sitting next to some dude and he's like, yeah, it's all right. And, and maybe that's his truth, or maybe he was conditioned to respond that way because he was told not to have too much excitement. And I don't want people to have that either. I want people to be present with whatever they're feeling. If that's his truth, that's fine. But if he's going through life kind of with this limp handshake, if this weren't a podcast, I'd call it a limp something else. But I want people to feel a vitality. And that's even the word connection means vitality, coming alive. And it doesn't mean just being happy. It means being with whatever is. One last thought. And I just love this one so much. I hope it's true. But it comes apparently from like the 18th century. This Mother Superior is eating partridge. You get the idea that this is an old story. She's eating partridge, and one of the younger nuns is watching her, and this Mother Superior is just making sounds like, oh my God, this is so good, so good. And the younger nun says, Mother Superior, shouldn't you be reserving that energy for our Lord Jesus Christ? And the Mother Superior shoots a look at her and says, listen, when I'm with our Lord Jesus Christ, I give him everything I've got. And when I'm with partridge, I give it everything I've got. I love that story. Like, be with it, man.
Story too. And but it brings out this component, and it's one of the things that Tim and I have talked about a lot, is just being in the moment and appreciating and savoring those things in life that too often we go through with that tape over the dashboard, and not even just over the dashboard, over the windows. Like, you don't even get to look out the windows of your car, and you're basically on autopilot, and that doesn't necessarily lead to a fulfilling, great life. And I love how you talk about that. You did talk about, you bring up this connections piece, and in your book, it's all about connections, and you talk about 4 really big connections. Can you just first define, because you define, I think, and maybe I'm wrong on this, so correct me if I am wrong, but I think you define connections different than I think many people would.
That's right.
You have connections with a variety of different things. Could you talk a little bit about what you mean when you talk about connections, and then talk about the bigger pieces that you bring up in the book?
Yeah, gladly, Kurt. So there are 2 things to think about. First of all, the actual definition that I came up with. The reason that this even happened is after 250 episodes on my podcast and after about 20,000 hours of operating as a psychologist, the word connection just kept showing up. And the word connection is nebulous. You look it up in the dictionary and it says something like connecting 2 train cars together. Not a really satisfying answer. It's like, okay, is that really what we're looking for? Because the word connection seems to be the precursor to everything we want, and doesn't seem to be just about connecting 2 train cars or something like them. Then I looked it up in the APA, the American Psychological Association definition. It too was lackluster. So I actually brought in 10 licensed mental health practitioners to help me form a definition. And I take an entire page, and it's life force. It's what brings us alive. It's vitality. You know it when you have it. It's and so I get into what that means. And then I also look at the 4 ways we connect, because most of the books out there on the word connection are about connecting with your partner, connecting with your clients, connecting with your children, connecting with your audience, whatever it might be. But it's not describing the 4 ways we humans connect. And here we go. The 4 ways. And if you can imagine 4 concentric circles, and at the center of these 4 concentric circles, almost like a target or a rippling after throwing a rock into a lake, is connecting to self. That is the primary connection. How we connect to ourselves informs how we connect to others. So if I see you and I've got a massive toothache, and you and I are doing something awesome together, eating a meal, watching some live music, but I have got a toothache that is a humdinger, how connected will I be with myself as I'm taking in this incredible experience? I'll be thinking about the toothache. Yeah. I'm just a giant toothache if it's that bad. But if I am completely there and there's nothing getting in the way and there's something authentic, kind of like what we're having now, I'm feeling nothing except for chilling with two guys, one guy in Minnesota, one guy in North Carolina. It's amazing. And the two of you, I mean, my gosh, please forget about it. You guys are great. So it's very easy for me to do that. But fortunately, I'm in no pain and I'm just absolutely stoked to be with you. It's also authentic. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not talking. I mean, when you asked me about George Michael, I wasn't pretending I didn't like him. When you asked me about coffee, if the two of you were tea aficionados, I wasn't pretending like, oh yeah, tea rules, coffee sucks. I wasn't saying, I mean, that would, but a lot of us go through life like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the average person lies multiple times a day. And one thing we also know, just before we go to the other connections, is that when we're not connected with ourselves, when we say something that's not true, and we try to exert maximum strength as we're lifting something, we aren't as strong. So that's an interesting thing. So imagine walking through life pretending you're someone you're not. And a lot of us are on certain levels doing exactly that. So connecting with ourselves is paramount. It's first. Outward, connecting with others. Connecting with my wife, connecting with my children, connecting with you guys. This is connecting with others. Connecting with my pets is definitely a significant other in my life. And I've included pets as an other. Mm-hmm. The editor suggested that was connecting with the world. And I was like, nope, they are others.
I love that.
They are others. And, there are certain things I acquiesce to. I was not acquiescing to that one.
Yeah.
But the third level is connecting with the world. The world can include art. It can include our work. It can include nature. It can even include our ancestry. Because as Maya Angelou says, something akin to if you don't know where you're going unless you know where you're from. You do need to know where you're from. It's really important. And I am a big believer in knowing ancestry. And that's one of the reasons why I have a whole part in that about interviewing my grandfather on video, because I knew he would predecease my children's birth. Like there was no way. And how am I going to describe my grandpa to my kids? Like he was awesome. Well, actually watch the video. So you'll see, and you'll see where you came from and where your names are from. Last but not least, connecting with something greater. For some people, they go to church on Sundays and they're religious. For other people, they are spiritual, but not religious. And for some people, they are hardcore atheists. It relates to everyone. I don't care how much of an atheist you are. If you go to the Grand Canyon, you're going to say the word wow. At some point, you're going to say wow. And wow is an indicator that something is going on inside your body, and that is called awe, A-W-E. And we've been studying awe under the microscope. And apparently, when we experience awe, it's like gratitude on steroids. Our brains actually change. We become less self-conscious. We're more likely to hug a stranger. Like when the eclipse happened in 2017 in Oregon, strangers were just like, oh my gosh, hugging each other. We're all, and what they found is that the effects of psilocybin, the psychoactive element in magic mushrooms, hits the brain. It's the same response as awe, just without the illegal substance that could have, other consequences. So awe is something we can experience every day. My colleague, Dr. Michael Amster, who wrote a book on awe, says he microdoses it and he tries to find it everywhere he looks. When he's making pancakes, he's watching the batter turn into solid and he gets awestruck. I get awestruck when I see my wife and just her being just the awesome human being she is. I actually say, wow. Even after 22 years, I hit the refresh button and hit that kind of Zen beginner's mind. I do it with the sunset. Tonight's sunset will be different from any sunset we ever have, and last night's was too. So why not experience that? Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel referred to it as radical amazement. Yeah. So that's always available to us.
Well, and yet at the same time, I want to get back to something you said earlier, that it's not about a lack of discernment.
That's right.
You're not just saying everything is great all the time, 100% of the time, everything is perfect. La, la, la. I live in, freaky la, la, la.
Well, that's the Lego movie song.
Yeah, I was going to say
awesome.
the Lego movie song, right?
That's right.
It's not about a lack of discernment.
It's not about that. Hell no. Thank you for bringing that up, Tim.
Yeah. Okay.
Discernment. In fact, it's really funny in my TED talk about men and emotions. One of the levels of really knowing yourself emotionally is that discernment. Is this true? And, my dad could go through life not wanting to touch a pet. And I can't even go through a day. And he, on his discernment, could sit through a 6-hour Wagnerian opera and be completely intrigued. And I would call it an expensive place to sleep after a few hours. Like, this is, I mean, discernment, we got to be real.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, obviously, sometimes we have to fake it. Right? We don't want to be the Debbie Downer. Like, if everybody's having a good time, you don't want to be the one who's like, oh, this sucks. But at least afterwards, you can have a debrief with someone else and say, I showed up for my friends. I was not the Debbie Downer. I wasn't doing anything against my values. I just didn't love it as much as I was pretending to, because I didn't want to be that guy. And that's also fine. That's also an act of conscious discernment. So
Well, and I think
discernment really runs the gamut.
Yeah, the alternate is true too. You don't want to show up. You're always that guy that is always just, everything is just, unicorns and rainbows. And you're going, sometimes, we have to show that, hey, we get, have some negative feelings as well, that we're not always that 100%. That discernment, I think, is very important as you're talking about that. And I love the concept of awe. We've done a couple shows where we've talked about it in various different pieces. And it is, to your point, I think one of the things that is a something that we can all just go out and search for and find. And if we do that, our lives are going to be that much better. So
you couldn't have said it better, Kurt. I do know, if you remember, if either you've seen Parks and Recreation, the character portrayed by Rob Lowe is Chris Traeger, and he's always like, oh, everything's awesome, and I'm chasing the sun in the morning, and blah, blah, blah. And he is really hiding depression. And I've known people like that who feel like they don't get to exist unless they put on that happy face. That Dick Van Dyke and Bye Bye Birdie, put on a happy face. I don't remember that song. But it's a great song. But there are times when we can't turn that frown upside down. And in fact, we shouldn't turn that frown upside down. And we need a safe place, whether it's a dear friend who will not judge us or a therapist. We need some place to access and know that part of being human.
And yet, isn't this kind of naturally human to just be connected to ourselves? Like, when reading that section of the book, I just thought, wow, isn't this sort of natural? Like, what are we doing wrong? Like, what gets in our way from being connected, at least appropriately?
Yeah, so some of these are internal and some of these are external. Some of these relate to our evolution. We are programmed to basically conform. And conformity, that need to conform, because our ancestors who didn't conform were basically banished from the clan and died out in nature alone.
That would suck.
It sucks. So we become socialized. We're told, boys don't cry and girls don't do this. Cynics, sales, puppy dog tails, and sugar and spice and everything nice. I mean, that's what I grew up singing, that damn song. It ain't true. It ain't true. But we're socialized to believe these lies, and it really distracts us from knowing who we are. Other distractors are social comparison. That's a really big one. The best way for me to feel crappy about something awesome, like I talk often about I just bought my very first new car. I've never bought a new car off the lot. I've always bought used cars, and it's no stunner. Nobody's turning their heads on this one. It's a Hyundai plug-in SUV. Hybrid SUV, and I love this thing. But I live in an area with Rivians and beautiful Porsches and Mercedes, and no one's turning their head. And I could look at the other cars in my hood and say, wow, why do they get those and I don't get that? Instead, I doubled down on my car because I know that what we appreciate appreciates. The more I appreciate this car, the more I will come to appreciate it. And it's been a meditation and a reality. And I'm not faking it. When I hit that ignition, I say, awesome car. And I swapped out the tires. I got rid of the OEMs because they were crap. I went on to TireRack.com and I saw the ratings of the ones that they gave me, and I could see why they weren't doing well in the rain. So I got some ridiculous high-end Michelins. And so every time I drive that car, my kids and my wife have to hear at some point, this car's pretty awesome. And then they also have to hear. Then they also have to hear some
tires.
And dude, it's as if you're in the car and like, how about these tires? And these tires are amazing. I'm so stoked on them, but I know the research and it informs me and it's authentic. I'm not faking it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really mean it. And you mean, would I love to have a Rivian? Sure.
Yeah.
But am I content with what I have? And, I'm going to sound like I'm religious, and I'm not particularly religious. I'm cultural, but somewhere in the Bible, somewhere it says something akin to who is rich, and it says the person who is happy with their lot.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really happy with what I've got because I know I could get really hungry for stuff that I don't need. And that is another distractor. So there's so many distractors internally and externally. Another one is FOMO,
Yeah.
the belief that I should be at this party that I don't want to go to, but if I don't go to it, I'll miss out. What about JOMO? What about the joy of missing out? What about the idea of like saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to chill at home. I'm going to crack open a beer, hang out with my dog and my wife, and it's going to be great. That is an option. That is a choice. We don't have to opt in. Social media, we have this thing in our pockets all the time, a blue light. It's calling to us. It's saying, feed me, look at me. Spend your time, go down these rabbit holes. I call them non-rejuvenating rabbit holes. I'm just going to go on Reddit for 5 minutes. And then 5 hours later, like, what happened to my time? I'm Rip Van Winkle. I've just woken up in Sleepy Hollow years later after reading stupid stuff that has done nothing for me except bring me down. Maybe it's caused my heart to race. Maybe it scared me. Maybe I feel like crap about the future, but it has done nothing to either edify, inform, or improve me.
Yeah. Adam, I really like the part where you were talking about how you like doubling down on appreciating your car and those types of things. And I think there's so much to be learned from that when we think about just our relationships in general and different things. Where we focus our attention all of a sudden gets, magnified in what we're doing. So whether it's in business, whether it's with our spouse, whether it's with our kids, where are you focusing your attention? And that's what I'm hearing you say is like, don't fake it, but where are you focusing? And if you focus in on the positive aspects, that's going to get magnified and the other parts are going to get lesser. Am I misconstruing what you're saying there?
Bro, we're eating ribs in North Carolina and I'm just nodding my head. I'm just nodding my head. This is great. Yes.
So
could not agree more.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, chalk one up for Kurt there. He got it right.
I'm done. I'm calling it a day. I'm focusing on my
Boom.
one good thing I said, and I'm calling it a day. There,
Kurt, it was all net.
Adam, you talk about knowing yourself, your whole self, your the fullest aspect of who we are as ourself, and I just wonder what's the path to that, because my perception is that can be difficult for a lot of us, right? How do we get to and this connectivity, right, is a key part of it. But if we don't know our whole self, is it more difficult to connect? And what can we do about that?
Well, I'm convinced that we will never know our whole self. We will die with valleys and oceans unknown. I remember reading back in the day when dummies books were big. I was reading one on time management. And he said, "You will die with your inbox fairly full." Like, and similarly, and we were talking offline, and about the old Leonardo da Vinci quote about art. Art is never finished, only abandoned. We will die somewhat abandoned projects, but we want to reduce the gap of that abandonment. We want to know as much as we can, and sometimes you'll find that we are fluid beings. What was true in my 20s is not true in this decade of my life. By the way, just a side piece, I'm really into questions more than answers in so many ways, because answers are temporary and questions are infinite. If I was to ask myself in my 20s what was important, I'd get a very different answer than I'd get today. But the question is important. What's important to you? Like, what a great question. What's important to you? How often are we really asked that question? Anyway, that is one of the ways in. I would also say the quality of our questions determines the quality of our life. So if I'm asking myself, how come you're such a jackass? I will basically, it'll be a Google search in my little, I'm drawing a little line. I'm drawing a little line on my forehead. It's as if I have a little, like a Google search bar in my brain. And I can find about 100 to 200 to 300 things that would actually suggest that I'm a jackass. It's not going to help me live a better life if I ask myself, what's missing? What are you needing? What are you really yearning for? What's working in your life? What's not working in your life? These are basic questions. I mean, there are more sophisticated questions I could ask. And that's one of the benefits of psychotherapy, and that I've received it plenty. I call myself the Hair Club for Men psychotherapist because, I'm not just a psychotherapist, but I also have received it a lot. And I really have benefited from it. I often say I earned my wife through it, because I'm more conscious than I would have been without it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm more conscious than someone else, but I am saying I'm more. And by the way, one of the other fixes: don't compare yourself to someone else. Compare yourself to you yesterday versus today versus tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we compare ourselves to the norm or comes somebody else, I mean, boy, oh boy. I mean, let's just say I've compared myself to Chris Hemsworth. This is not going to work out on a lot of measures.
No. You will compare very favorably to Chris. I'm sure you will.
Yes.
It's just a matter.
Oh boy.
Just choose the right, metrics.
Criterion.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of the ones I'm thinking of, like ab strength and guns on his arms, I think boom.
I'm thinking, number of podcasts that he's done, for
there you go.
The great connections that he's made with
but
people.
I could get lost.
Right,
but I could get lost in that, and that would be stupid. It would be a waste of my life. It's kind of like that Einsteinian quote that the fish who thinks it should fly will think itself a failure. I need to compare myself to the criteria that matter to me, and compare myself to me yesterday versus today versus tomorrow, not to some imaginary foe. And we get so lost in that. We get so competitive, and it's just not healthful or helpful. But back to the question at hand, which I'm so involved in that I can't even remember the official question. Tim, can you remind me?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're here.
I think we walked around
the whole self.
Accessing the whole self.
We were talking
accessing the whole self. So we're going to know. So I think the way I would formulate it, and the way I would do it in the Google search in my brain, is how can I get to know myself just a little bit better today? Maybe 1% better today. What could I notice that I do that isn't serving me? What is feeding me and what is bleeding me? I love that question, by the way, feed versus bleed. It could even be very similar to what we have in our closet. Marie Kondo, who's like become this massive superstar of the art of cleaning. We can do that externally with our closets and feel a truer sense of ourself as it relates to the closet. We can also do that with ourselves, pruning away activities that don't serve us, saying, you know what, I'm spending 30 minutes on social media. I feel like crap. I'm going to pare it down to 5 minutes a day, and I'm going to give myself a max. First, a lot of introverts, many introverts I hear hate small talk. And one of the hacks I've heard in the ethers is literally an introvert having the guts to say to another person, I'm on a small talk diet. I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
And it's a big talk question. And somebody named Kalina Silverman, who came on my podcast, she is all about big talk. She even has big talk cards that you can have at your dinner table to foster better. What do we ask our kids during dinner? Well, how was your day? And they say, oh, it's fine. Like, well, can you tell me what? No, nothing. Did nothing. But what if we had better prompts like the rosebud and the thorn prompt, which I use, which lends itself to them knowing themselves better and us knowing them better, and maybe us knowing ourselves better as we hear them. The rosebud and the thorn is a very easy thing. I believe it actually originates in the Boy Scouts. Rose is something that was good that happened today. A bud is something I learned today, and a thorn is something that hurt today. And by talking about those things, they stem out into a whole bunch of other things. And what my wife and I did was we started doing it with each other in front of the children. We have 2 boys. And within about 2 days, they're like, I'm in. I want to talk about my rosebud and thorn.
Yeah.
And that has become a thing for years, and they've come to expect it. And the conversations that happen just as the byproduct of this simple exercise, these simple prompts. Quality of your questions determines the quality of your life. Quality of your prompts determines the quality of your life. Asking good questions, and their emotional intelligence has gone up. profoundly. By the way, side note, both of my kids are stoked that both of their parents are psychologists. Now you might imagine, like the cobbler's child who has no shoes, or the dentist child who has false teeth or something. I don't know. It's not the case in our house. We don't weaponize psychology. We use it to inform better choices. Our kids are stoked that their parents do what they do. And I'm really happy. I used to say kind of jokingly, our children are well adjusted in spite of the fact that their parents are psychologists, which is funny, but it's actually, the truth is, I would actually say they're doing well partially because we are psychologists and because we are willing to bring in the best stuff and we do not weaponize.
I needed to take parenting advice from you, Adam, because my kids who are 18 and 15 are you pulling some of that psychological stuff on us again? And it's just, so they're bringing that. There's so many different places we could go with this. There's part of this that you had written a whole thing on the difficulty of modern friendships and kind of why are modern relationships so hard. There's also this aspect that I really enjoyed, which is this idea of savoring that we kind of talked on earlier, but you bring in this element of Winnie the Pooh that I think you got from the Benjamin Hoff book, the Tao Pooh.
Love that book.
Yeah. And, like how Pooh savors his honey and how you can use that as an example. So I'll leave it up to you. You can talk about why are modern friendships so hard, or, bring in the honey and savoring and what
Kurt, I'm doing a twofer because those are great prompts. First of all, savoring. I mean, what is the point of living life if you're not there for it? I go out to dinner. Here I am in Silicon Valley. I see a family of 4. All of them are on their phones. They're not talking with each other, and they're not really tasting their food.
Wow.
Yeah. And these are nice restaurants where the food is good. It's really good.
And maybe expensive too.
And really expensive. So they're not doing what Mother Superior was doing with the partridge.
Yes.
They're not there for it. There's an old James Joyce quote of, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. They're doing that.
Yeah.
And that's not really what we're meant to do. What we're meant to do is be there for it. Ram Dass said, be here now. Well, let's be here now for the food. Let's savor it. Or when we're on vacation, maybe dude, I don't know if you guys ever have this experience. You're at a nice hotel in a beautiful tropical place. You go to the gym for a quick workout. Now, personally, I prefer to work out in the ocean or the pool because I want to be outside. But sometimes we go to the gym and it's got CNN or some other news channel on, and it's reminding you of the world back home. I don't want to see that crap when I'm out there. That gets in the way of savoring.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is, and by the way, this is a real thing. It's called a cognitive afterimage. So you see something disturbing on the news while you're on your beautiful tropical vacation. Pair that with the idea of being at Disneyland and you walk by It's a Small World. What do you hear after you see or hear It's a Small World? You hear the damn song for the rest of the day.
Yep.
And when you see some bad news on the news and you go back out to the beach, it's not quite the same beach as it would have been if you didn't see the news. You didn't need the news while you were on that Hawaiian vacation that you spent so much money on and cost so much PTO. And I would say the cognitive afterimage keeps us from savoring the beauty of what's actually going on there.
Yeah.
That's thing one. Thing two was it about friendships?
Friendships. What the difficulty of modern friendships that you talked about?
Oh man, I love that one, Kurt. So here I am in Silicon Valley working with these really high achieving adults, and they were born in Ohio. They were educated in the East Coast. They go for their first job or whatever in Texas. They come to Silicon Valley. They're living here. They're raising kids. And in each place they lived, whether it was Ohio, East Coast, Texas, they had friends there. And they were positive they would stay in touch with those friends, but they didn't. Out of sight, out of mind. New things came in. Friendship was not prioritized. Meanwhile, let's just pair this on the side. Esther Perel, who's one of the greatest voices. Yeah, you're nodding. Yeah, she's amazing. I mean, such a rock star. She basically nailed it when she said, we used to live in villages where we had tons of people to fill different roles. We had somebody to drink with, somebody to build with, somebody to fish with, hunt with, play cards with, whatever it might be. And now we expect our spouse to play all of those roles. And that is too much for a spouse. And I'm here to tell you, my wife fills many roles, but she does not want to watch the Golden State Warriors. She couldn't care less about live sports. She does not want to watch Lord of the Rings with me. There are a bunch of things that she will not do. And if I was to have her do those things, she would likely, what I would say, consent and resent. She would do it, but she wouldn't like doing it. And I don't want that. I've got other people in my life. So friends are really important, but friends are also important because we need to be able to consult with them for things for a really good opinion. And you want smart friends and you want different types of friends. Think of friends as superheroes. They all have strengths and limitations. The guy who helps you move might not be the guy who you talk to about deep emotional stuff. The guy you watch sports with and really geek out to that with might not be the guy who helps you, figure out your taxes. But everybody having a really beautiful, like almost like an Amish barn builder situation where you've got different people filling different roles and all of them are good. And it's a mutuality. And some people you just sit and chill and have a cup of coffee with, and it's the greatest conversation you've ever had. I call that a hang-in vibe. I love a good hang-in vibe. That's like one of my favorite things in life. But I have other friends for other things. And I can tell you, the guy who helps me with some of my most complex technical stuff is not a great hang-in viber. And I don't expect him to be because that's just not his lane. But I love him anyway. And he comes to my parties and he's very important to me. So having friends is so crucial. And I see these incredibly smart people who are attractive and friendable. And if it wasn't illegal or unethical for me as a therapist to like say, hey, after the session, like, let's go grab a beer. I can't do that. Yeah. That would be bad. They do it in Shrinking. That's a TV show. And it's a really funny TV show. And I'm glad it exists because it, removes some of the taboo of therapy, but the boundaries that they have on that show are just
zero.
It's like, come on. But it's a show and it's fun. And I love it. So grateful to Bill Lawrence for coming up with yet another great show. So what I ask of my people who tell me, okay, so now my friends are basically just relegated to the parents of my children's friends. Yep. And I wouldn't choose them. First thing I do is I say, all right, think about the friends you left behind in Ohio, East Coast, and Texas. What if you were to awkwardly call them and say, hey, Tim, I know it's been a minute since we used to hang out back in the day on the East Coast. And I know I dropped the ball. You reached out to me and I kind of screwed up. I still want to be in touch. Are you down with having a renewed friendship, even from a distance? Even if it means just a FaceTime and a beer, even if it means just talking to each other on the phone once in a while and supporting each other as we go through life. These renewed friendships are the first place you look because there's a history and there's already something there. And the question is, who do you want to be? I call it the 5 people. I mean, Jim Rohn many years ago said, this is not science, but it's intuitive. We become the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. So choose your 5 carefully. And I remember meeting my wife's friends before we were officially a couple. And that was the clincher. When I met her friends and knew, oh, this is her advisory board. Yeah. Like if she's bummed out about me, these are the people she's going to get advice from. Yeah. Like these are good people. And she described them to a T. She wasn't like, oh my gosh, this person's amazing. And I met her and she was just like, what are you talking about? Yeah. It was, oh my God, these people are amazing. And my thought was, oh my God, these people are amazing. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I see what you see. I want them as your advisory board when you're bummed out about something that I did, if that should be the case. And we all need to be around good people. But that was, for me, I knew that her having good friends was going to be important for her and for our relationship. So that she wouldn't have to lean entirely on me to do the things that she would want to do, like go to the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival. I don't want to go to the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival. I mean, if we're going to, Bottle Rock, I'm down. But I don't want to sit in the cold Golden Gate Park, watching dueling banjos. It's not my thing. Although I must confess, I recently saw a bluegrass band that blew my mind. And so maybe in the future, I will go with her. But for the first few years, it was like, hey, babe, have a great time. I'm going to go do something
The question
else.
stays the same, but the answer changes, right? So there you
That's
go.
it.
That's
The
like
question's eternal.
you're
The answer changes.
yeah. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Well, I just want to stick with this for just a second. And we are continuing our conversation with Adam Dorsay about Super Psyched. How do you counsel the introvert, the I'm not really so much interested in building new friends when they move to the new area and they've left all their friends behind in Cleveland and Austin?
They actually are. They're just scared.
Hmm.
People who need people are the luckiest people in the world is how the song goes. But the fact is, all of us need people.
Right.
All of us. Even the most introverted, they just don't want them with the same frequency. My colleague and friend, Britt Frank, who's a great author, shared with me when she was a guest on my podcast that some people have schedules that are feeding schedules similar to very different animals in terms of the frequency with which they need to see friends. Some people are basically hummingbirds. They need to see friends all the time.
Yeah.
Think about Joey from Friends. He was always in every scene. He was like Joey. He was like the friend's friend. And then there were some friends like Ross, who was not in every scene. He was a little bit more of an introvert. He was a bit quirky. He was an intellectual, a professor. He didn't need to see people quite as frequently. And he had a feeding schedule that is similar to a scorpion. Now, I'm not talking about the toxic effects of a scorpion. I'm not talking about the scorpion and the frog story of them swimming across the river. I'm talking about simply the feeding schedule. And apparently, and I don't know this, I did not verify this, but I trust Britt, that scorpions need to eat like a couple times a month.
Wow.
So if that is true, we all are on a spectrum with the frequency with which we need to visit with our friends. And the most introverted person, I would let them know, yeah, it's normal that you're a little scared and maybe you're afraid of rejection. Introverts actually make the best friends because they tend to be the most loyal and they tend to be better listeners.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be more introspective. They tend to be, on average, I mean, some of them are not, but on average, according to Susan Cain, who wrote the book on it, Quiet, the power of introversion in a world that won't stop talking. I think that's the title. Wonderful book. I'm married to an introvert. I fall more extroversion. Shocker. And introverts definitely need friends, and introverts can actually grow their ability to be a little bit more extroverted. Laurie Santos talked about that recently on her podcast, and out of Yale. She's fabulous.
Yeah.
Will be a guest on mine in a couple of weeks.
Oh, cool.
And love her. And extroverts like me can become more ambiverted. I've actually learned from my cats and from my wife and other introverted natured people or animals, the power of quiet. And I'm so grateful to my wife for teaching me that. So I would say I have gone a little bit more toward the center as it relates to the introvert, extrovert, ambivert question. So bottom line, loneliness hurts more than the pain of rejection. And one of the things I tell my introverts is put yourself out there. Dr. Vivek Namurthy, who's identified the loneliness epidemic that you're nodding on, it's real. I mean, it's deadly. Lonely. We're meant to be around people. It's worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day to be profoundly lonely, according to certain studies. It's a bigger predictor of our mortality based on certain cardiological studies. I mean, than say our lipids or our A1C, a whole bunch of things come to the fore. So we really have an imperative, a health imperative, a longevity imperative, a quality of life imperative to have friends in our life who are excellent. And I would also add, use the drive away test when you're meeting with a friend, because just because somebody's available doesn't mean that they are friendable. They might just suck up all the air in the room and bring everything. You're telling them about your trip to Japan and they go off on a 20-minute tirade on Japan or, whatever, and don't listen to your story. And you get in the car as you're driving away. And the driveway test is, do you feel happier for having used your time in this way?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you feel sucked dry? And many times it's okay if once in a blue moon,
Yeah.
somebody awesome, you don't feel great on the drive away. But if the trend is leaning towards, oh my gosh, I feel sucked dry, that might not be a place to invest that one non-renewable resource we have called time. You can lose your health and get it back. You can lose your money and get it back, but you can't lose your time and get it back. And if we are the average of the 5 people with whom we spend the most time, maybe spend your time with someone else.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's it's a nice way of actually being able to, measure this, right? Because it is so hard sometimes. Like, we know we have those people in our lives that drain us, but we just move on. And then, it happens again and again and again. And so I love the drive away test as a way of just like going, yeah, maybe I focus in on some other sets of friends at this point and kind of prioritize them. But I think that's really cool. So,
And
Tim,
if I may
know,
just throw in a little asterisk here after that one, Kurt. So if you are going to renew a friend, like I was mentioning, like let's say Tim and I were going to renew the relationship. We hadn't seen each other for decades and we live far away. Some people say, oh my gosh, but I'm on Zoom all the time at work. I can virtually guarantee you that a nice conversation with Tim over Zoom, each of you drinking your coffee or your beer or whatever it is going to be a very different Zoom experience than Zoom. And it's the second best way to see somebody. Obviously, first is IRL. I'm also a fan of the old phone. My buddy Jed, who I talk about in my book, I refer to him as the coolest guy ever.
Yeah.
The one thing that's not cool about him, he lives in South Orange, New Jersey. I love South Orange, New Jersey, but it's too far away from California for me to see him regularly. I haven't seen him in 9 years. Actually, I saw him over the summer for the first time in 9 years. And I realized at this clip, I'll see him 5 more times before I die. That's not acceptable.
Wow.
The coolest guy ever. So yesterday we had an hour walk and talk. He was walking his dog Jesse out in the snow, and I was walking in the sun in California. And we got into it, and the driveway test was amazing. I was way taller at the end of the conversation, and we're scheduling up, Zooms. Stevie Wonder said, I just called to say I love you. We don't need to have a reason to call someone. Call just because you love the person. Just because they're on your mind. You heard a joke that reminded you of them. It doesn't freaking matter. Call. The thing we regret most when we're on our deathbed, there are 2 big ones. We regret not having taken chances. We don't care about the failures. And the love we left on the table. And the love we left on the table could include not being in touch with our friends. So just call to say I love you. Stevie Wonder got it right. And so did Paul McCartney when he said that love is basically the answer to all the things.
Yeah.
No kidding.
All right. So listeners, you can pause this right now and send a text to your friend, call them up, take that conversation going. You can pause and then we'll come right back because I know Tim wants to talk about music.
Hey, this is Kurt, and we want to say thanks for listening to Behavioral Grooves. And we hope that you're enjoying this episode, but it feels a little bit one-sided. You're hearing from us, but we're not hearing from you.
This is Tim, and we have 2 suggestions to remedy that. The first is join our Facebook page and engage with us.
We want to talk with you. We want to hear your perspectives, and hopefully our Facebook page might be the place to have some of that interaction. So please come and join us.
The other recommendation we have for you is to leave us a quick rating. The little 5-star thing at the bottom of your app, or a short review. Just leave us a few words about what you like about Behavioral Grooves. We'd very much appreciate it.
Thanks, and we now return you to our regularly scheduled programming.
Okay, so we're back. Now that you've texted your friends that you haven't talked to in 9 years, you don't want it to wait. You talked about music filling your cup. And now that Cafe of Regent is disbanded, and does music still fill your cup?
Music fills my cup so much. So you were talking about Cafe Regret, which was the band I played in high school, and yes. I it was so funny too, by the way, Tim, because I had no business being in this band. It was almost like I was a junior high schooler playing with these college students. I mean,
they were good.
They were really good, and I played bass where I could do least damage, but I didn't sound anything like Flea or like Geddy Lee. I didn't sound like a good bass player. I wasn't making trouble. I was following. But the experience of having sonic waves going through your body as you're playing them may have been one of the most joyful things I've ever done. I wished those practices would never end. I hated it when they would end. It was, and I was the band psychologist. These were guys with really, really strong personalities, and they were geniuses musically. And oftentimes there's with a musical genius, oftentimes there is a strong personality, and that was going on. And I was kind of like the peacemaker, and I was the guy who said, hey, let's not practice, like lined up as if we're playing live. Let's practice in a circle so we can all look at each other and groove off each other. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. And it was way better. We were much more cohesive when we'd play live things. My God, that was so joyful. The other players in that band did continue to play music in their own way.
None of them turned pro, though, right? Is that?
I'd say that one of them turned fairly pro, and believe it or not, at their apex, they opened up for a flock of seagulls. I wasn't in the band at the time, but that was pretty cool.
Wow.
Getting to open up for somebody like that.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, had close contact with a lot of, big names and got to do collaborations and other things. They're really, really unbelievably skilled. They actually had a reunion. I didn't get to play for that because the subsequent bass player, who was actually really good, was the guy that they used in 2019. They played a last event, and they were killer. I mean, they were absolutely mind-blowing to see these guys who I knew from high school and just how much they'd evolved as musicians. I mean, they were so definitely pro level.
That's cool.
But music is so important to me, and what cracks me up is seeing my sons. There must be a genetic element to this because my sons have the broadest musical sense that I've ever seen. And even when I proposed to my wife, I proposed to her with, this Icelandic band playing in the background, Sigur Rós, that I just think is just like one of the darkest, most beautiful bands that I've ever heard. But I love music. I love it in all of its forms. And I'm so excited. People sometimes, you see your fuddy-duddies saying, oh, music today sucks. The music today is amazing.
Yeah.
And the music from every generation is amazing. Sometimes when I exhume, like when I'm doing a building project and I put up, an old Zeppelin album, I'm just like, this is so current. I don't understand how these four guys made this music that is so permanent. And then I'll listen to somebody new. It could be, it could be Keane. It could be Mumford and Sons. I don't care. It could be something done by a DJ like Avicii, who I love, or David Guetta. I love these guys. Lil Nas X.
Yep.
By the way, who I saw in concert, and I did not know his music. He was at a festival. He was playing. I didn't know what I was about to see, and I just noticed that my body was jumping all over the place, and I was screaming like a kid at Disneyland. Like, it was the most exciting event. I felt like I was watching Prince. Oh, I'm talking to a guy out in Minnesota. And by the way, one of the biggest regrets I have is never having seen Prince live. The greatest, most incredible genius ever. And the stories about Prince are so mind blowing. But music is a big deal. I didn't understand the Grateful Dead until later on, and sadly it was after Jerry died. I saw Dead & Co.
Yeah,
and I saw them and I got it. I got it. It was just like, oh, this is what they've been talking about. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. And then there's Fishbone. Yeah. Like, I remember seeing Fishbone in the 80s, and they were throwing their instruments all over the place. They were the most exciting band, and they were musically amazing. And they played this incredible version of punk ska that was just way, way, way cooler than anything I'd ever heard. And, when I think about the greatest shows, I think about those. And then, one night with Jed over in Hoboken, we were looking at Manhattan, and he was playing his vinyl, and I was like, dude, this is great music. What is it? And he said, it's Les Paul. And I said, wow, is that guy still alive and playing? He said, yeah, he plays in Manhattan. He plays every Tuesday night. And I was like, dude,
it's Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. And he's like, you want to go? And so we went and saw Les Paul months before he died, just a couple months.
And he was still performing. He was still getting out and doing
performing
shows.
with his arm that he had properly set after an accident, so that he could continue to perform. And he destroyed. And it's like, I think about these musical events, and you can tell how excited I am. It really fills my cup. I love music. It's such a big deal to me, and I love music that sometimes polarizes people, and I don't quite get it. I think a lot of it relates to, sadly, joy that people are not willing to experience. I think the whole George Michael question is he is joyful.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, particularly sadly men, have difficulty really getting into joy. And if you need evidence, there was this goofy meme of this guy on YouTube. It became this massive hit of this guy looking at a double rainbow going out of his mind. It's a double rainbow. And I don't know if you remember this one. And even South Park clowned on it. And I love South Park. Oh my God, Trey and Matt are like two of the greatest geniuses of all time. But what I'm driving at here in my total excitement, as you can hear, is it's sad that people were clowning on this guy who was having a joyful awe experience.
Yeah.
This guy was in a state of awe. Now, I get it. It's low hanging fruit. It's easy to clown on. For those of you familiar with, Parks and Recreation, it's easy for us to access our inner April Ludgate, who can kind of go dark on anything. And I love April Ludgate. Great character, by the way. But I wouldn't want her as my, as the person who brings the joy to a thing. And I felt sad for this guy who was clowned on. I hope that he was able to stay true to himself and realize that he won the day. He experienced something ethereal.
Well, with that, Adam, I think that's a perfect spot where we can wrap everything up. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a guest on Behavioral Grooves today.
Dudes, you guys are doing awesome. What a great podcast. Tim and Kurt, the two of you together as a team, phenomenal. So thank you for having me on board. This has been a blast.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Adam, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our enthusiastic Kurt and Tim brains. Tim brain.
It doesn't quite work like enthusiasm.
No, it doesn't, does it? No. I will say Adam is one of the most positive, enthusiastic. I understand why he got that nickname. It's not a wrong nickname by any means.
Yeah,
so,
like all those guys in positive psychology need to be studying Adam because he is it. He embodies it.
Yeah. All right. So,
okay,
Tim, what did you take away from our conversation with enthusiasm?
Build and maintain relationships because we are social beings. We are relationship monsters. We need relationships to thrive. We need relationships to be healthy. And it might be some, work, to kind of figure out what are the marginal relationships versus what are the important relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. But the idea that more relationships is just not better. In fact, fewer can be better if they're good relationships. It's focusing on building and maintaining really good relationships with a few people.
Those very strong relationships where they take, as he talked about in The Village, right? There are certain people that we really go out to have fun with, and there's other people who we talk about our deepest fears, and there's other people who we have to boost us up when we're feeling down. And sometimes there's, a person can take multiple roles in various different things, but oftentimes they're different people, and we need to make sure that we're not missing that and not putting that onus on too few of people. But as you said, if there are few but they're better, then that's good too.
Imagine if you need a band, right, to make a lot of sounds, to have really great music. Bands help having a variety of musicians. If you ask the same person to play the bass and the keyboard and the drums and the guitar, to sing lead vocal and do all the backup vocals, be the composer and the arranger and the producer, like only Stevie Wonder can do that.
It's just too hard. You've seen those one-man band things where they have the bass drum on their back and they're booming and they got the guitar and the harmonica boom chicka boom chicka. There you go. Yeah. All right.
It's not realistic.
We're being facetious there, but this idea, right, that people have different skill sets and different connections, as we
Yeah.
talk about, right? And it is really interesting. We've had a lot of recent episodes that talk about connections and this idea
Yeah.
of connecting with yourself first, this idea of you have to put your own mask on. You have to understand what is it that drives you and what are your values?
Yeah.
Who are you? Who is your true self, as we are exploring in the book that we're writing, right? So it's this idea of understanding who you are.
That is the truth. The other, something else that keeps coming up in our conversations about what we're working on is the duck effect. And this whole idea of getting a little bit of perspective and coming from self-awareness and awareness of the world around us is really important.
Yeah.
So, Kurt, you want to just remind listeners to what the duck effect is?
Oh, duck, not with an F.
No,
Okay.
with a D.
Sorry.
The duck.
I thought you were just like the F it, effect where, yeah, just don't give a shit about anything, right?
Well, that's me on a daily basis. But
Oh,
this
the
is
duck effect.
this is the duck effect.
Like that bird, that, yeah. So
Yes.
so we talked about this before, but right, this is the idea that, hey, we look and we see ducks on that pond and they look so smooth and they're gliding across the water and it looks effortless, but we don't know what's going on underneath. Underneath is paddling like crazy. What did you call it in the last one? Platafoom, flatafam. You did some rap thing about it, right?
I don't
But
know.
that's
Yeah.
this idea, this idea that, we look at people either because of social media or just because that's how people get presented, particularly in work, right? Oh, I have everything together. Everything is so wonderful in my life. When in fact, there's a lot of shit going on underneath, right? There's a lot of paddling
That's right.
going on. And we don't see that. And oftentimes we then, assume that I should be able to glide just like that other person across this pond. And I don't really understand that, yeah, there's a lot of paddling and that's normal and it's good.
Just by way of example, we have a friend a mutual friend who is just barely 60 years old, and
Yeah.
he's suffering from cancer, and it's a terminal cancer. He just had open heart surgery, and yet he and his wife were recently in the Bahamas because they need a break because like life has been crazy for the last couple of years, and so they posted a couple of pictures on social media of what it's like to be in the Bahamas, and like that's really cool. And if you don't know the story, you think that he and his wife are just out living the good life. His life is in the last couple of years, like the clock is ticking for him, and life is really hard. But you look at social media, and I'm, by the way, this is not to assault them. This is actually to praise them for saying we're living as best as we can in these circumstances. But unless you actually sort of know the nuances and the backstory, you might interpret that as, oh my gosh, they're just on another vacation. They're just having the time of their life.
We make judgments about people because of those images that we see
Yeah.
without understanding what's going on underneath the water, right? That what our feet are doing. And that's a really great example, because if you didn't know that, and again, in social media, part of this is that it's not just our close friends that we're typically connected with. We're connected with
That's
people
right.
from high school, from that we just met, through a friend of a friend or different pieces. And so we don't know the backstories. We don't
Yeah.
know what their feet are doing. And that then creates in our own mind for ourselves is, oh my gosh, everybody's life is so much better than mine.
Yeah. This
Everybody is
asymmetry.
doing so much. They're not working nearly as hard, and yet they're getting all of these wonderful things. Same thing at work. We see these people and we look at like, oh, they got promoted. They got that easy position. They got that without
Yeah.
really knowing what they did in order to get there.
Yeah, or seeing exactly what they did in the eyes of the people that promoted them. Like they're doing great work, but you're not seeing it because you're not involved in those projects.
It's the Leon Festinger stuff, right? About our social comparison, the
Yeah.
upwards with tendency to look upward. we don't look down, right? We don't
Right.
compare ourselves to the people who have it worse off than us. We compare ourselves to people who
Yeah.
have it better than us. And that's part of our human nature. It's part of what has driven us as a race to do all of the wonderful things that we have and some of the terrible things that we've had as well when you look at all of that. But
Yeah.
that's part of our DNA. And knowing that, hopefully, though, we can maybe get perspective on it and not fall prey to that aspect of, wow, my life is not matching up to what it should be because I see all these other people out there doing all these fantastic things. And I'm stuck here, having to do a podcast with you.
Well, I just want to go back to Leon Festinger because I don't even know how to respond to that.
You got that was funny. You normally have a pushback, but you just got caught. You were
no, you're right.
I was too serious. And then I just threw that in. Was that it?
Maybe I don't know, but
the disconnect
maybe you're right.
between.
You're like, oh my god, like.
Oh, maybe. That was it. Oh, you're going, oh shit, I'm actually stuck here with Kurt.
I'm stuck in this warp time machine. No, I'll go back to Leon Festinger and I just think about we sped it genetically, it made sense for us, our ancient ancestors to compare ourselves to the people ahead of us. But in today's world, there's too much of that. There's too much. It's too easy for us to have lots and lots and lots of examples of comparing ourselves and wanting and striving for country club when we'd actually be happier if we were comparing ourselves to Sam's Club.
Nice comparison. And I think the other thing is we grew up in tribes and villages where, as much as people tried to put a good face on their life, and we always do, right? You go to a party, how are things going? And you go, great, and you talk about the good things that are happening in your life, real life. Mm-hmm. But, there is more of that ability to peel back the layers on those people in the tribe or the villages. We understand, oh, they're going through some hard. I heard through, our rumor mill that, hey, there's difficulties in their marriage, or as we talked about our friend who they're sick, they're having all of these things. And so you have a more holistic perspective of those people. And so that comparison is more grounded as opposed to today's widely scattered social connections where we just see the pictures, the beautiful Christmas pictures, the beautiful travel pictures, the new car, all of those things that we don't see what is going on in their real world. And so that social comparison is out of whack. It is out of proportion. And that makes a difference. So I think one of the real interesting pieces in all this is we talked about, we're working on this book, Finding Your Groove. It's about finding, that life that will give you more chances to be happy, to find joy, to have meaning. How do you set that up? But part of that is understanding what are some of the factors that get in the way. And some of that is this comparison as we're talking about here. But part of it is also, understanding what is our true self. We don't always take the time to really peel back the layers on our own self to say, what really engages me? What are the things that will provide me joy in my life? What's the work that I really want to do, not just because it has a title or prestige or gives me so much money, but because it provides me intrinsic value that gives me, meaning in life.
Significance. There's so much out there that there's a sort of a finger pointing message about how it's not about having what you want. It's about wanting what you have, right? This whole idea that if you were just satisfied with your life as it is, everything would be great. And I've always kind of thought that that's bullshit. Because it's not who we are. It's not who we are as humans. It doesn't
Right.
reflect the nature of how we we are striving. We are striving individuals, and actually, there's been some work done by Larson and McKibben, and they did some research where they tried to set this actual issue up in the laboratory and say, well, how much do people value what they have, and how happy are they from that versus how much happiness that are they going to derive from the things that they want. And what these researchers found, and this was just done in 2008, is they realized that we need both. Like, we need a certain amount of satisfaction, and we are going to draw a certain amount of happiness from the striving, from the what we want. But we also are going to take happiness, and our well-being in part is informed by what we already have. And I'm not just talking about physical possessions, but relationships and experiences and all that kind of stuff as well. So as always, the science kind of leads us to a more nuanced story, that it's not just if you just stop striving, you'd be so happy. Well, we're not going to stop striving. We're not going to stop wanting. We don't, that's just not
So
going to happen.
you are just getting kicked out of the Stoics Club, aren't you?
Oh,
You just officially, we're giving you the boot, man. You are no longer in the Grooving Stoics Club. No, it's. I'm sorry, you joke. I joke. Sorry, but I think there's some really interesting pieces of that, right? Because we often, it's not that we shouldn't be savoring and focusing in on all of the good things that we have in our lives. That is 100% a good thing to do.
Yes.
Enjoy that eggs for breakfast, as we talk about, savor that, enjoy the sunset, enjoy the fact that you are married and have a wonderful spouse. And they might not be perfect, but man, they offer so much to you and how good that is, right? But you also have to strive. You also have to say, what's next? What is that motivation? We know that we get, elements of engagement from what's next, right? The video game, if I get really good at beating level 1 of a video game and I go to level 2, I need to have more challenge. If it's the same as level 1 and then level 3 is the same as level 1, right? It's too easy. We actually strive on some of that challenge, and we need to have that. So that's a big piece of this, I think.
All that, yeah. Can I just say one last thing, that commenting about Adam had a comment about the value of playing music, of actually being a musician, playing it live, in front of an audience. It was a rock band, he was in kind of a rock band. It was loud and noisy, and there he talked about how it's such a cool thing. And I just want to encourage people to go out and listen to live. If you're not a musician, go out and listen to live music. Be in the audience, experience it, feel the heart pumping bass throbbing through your chest, because it's amazing that
I have it in my headphones. Doesn't that work? I can just turn it on your favorite Spotify or Pandora, and I can just get all of the mix, and I can sit there in my room while I'm watching a movie and put that on as well, or reading some book, and just multitask and have all of that wonderful stuff.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
If you could reach through the screen and throttle me,
throttle you. I would. It's not about the headphone experience is totally in your cranium. Get out and have it, experience it in your body. Even if it's a a lilting folk musician, which I love, by the way. Just be in the moment to experience it so that all of your focus is on that. And I think music can have a tremendously powerful effect. That's
All right. Well, with
that's
that, I think that is the perfect ending for this episode. So let's wrap it up there, right?
Sounds good. Okay. So getting psyched, right? Connecting to yourself, connecting to others, connecting to something bigger than yourself. These are all ways of improving your life, right? To make your life better. So just take Adam's words and start to think about ways that you can make those kinds of connections to make your life better.
Another way to improve your life, Tim? You know another way? It's to subscribe to Behavioral Grooves YouTube channel. That would make your life so much better, listeners. Just subscribe.
Hit the subscribe
our YouTube
button.
channel. Yeah.
Let's do it together. Hit the subscribe button. You didn't follow me on that one. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to actually hit I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm already subscribed. So there you go. That's why my life is so much better. All right. We hope that you got super psyched and super connected to meaningful relationships this week, and that you use that to help you go out and find your groove.